Speedrunning has been something that I find interesting for quite some time now, and I've always wanted to try it out myself but never really knew how to get into it. Whenever an event like AGTQ is on, I tend to watch quite a bit of it because it's always super cool to see so many different games being played and people showing their expertise at all the little tricks and mechanics within those games. Now obviously, speedrunning a game usually requires a lot of practice, and I'd say most people tend to speedrun a game they've been playing for a long time already, so that's where I sort of fell short, as the only games I actively play and have actively played for a long time are RuneScape and League of Legends. But a few months ago, everyone's second favorite quest guide maker Soup uploaded this video on the old school RuneScape tutorial island speedrun, which he also attempted himself. He ended up taking away the bronze medal as he managed to complete the tutorial island in 3 minutes and 26 seconds, at the time being the third fastest time to do so. He then challenged everyone watching it to try it out for themselves and to beat his time. And so I felt obligated to eventually give it a go myself as well, and what can I say, I managed to do a pretty good job at it. Now, just as a disclaimer, considering Soup made a very detailed video on this topic already, there might be some overlap in information shared or things shown, as you may expect, and I still highly suggest checking out his video on this as well if you haven't already. Now obviously, to try and set a good time, I had to prepare myself for this challenge, as going in blind would mean I'd have to figure things out without any specific knowledge nor previous experience that I'd be able to apply. Now luckily, all of the speedruns registered on speedrun.com require the users to send in video evidence of every speedrun they put up, so the most valuable resource to find information from was the video of the world record on this speedrun, which was done by Research. His time was far better than any other attempt done by other people, as he managed to complete the entire tutorial island in no more than 2 minutes and 54 seconds. Needless to say, he's pretty much done everything tick perfect when it comes to NPC dialogue and other actions, but there were also two distinct tricks he used to skip parts of the tutorial island that I'd have to apply as well if I wanted to be able to set a decent time for myself. The first trick he used made it able to skip a big part of the first section on Tutorial Island, where you'd normally have to fish a shrimp, then cut a log to light a fire to finally cook the shrimp. He simply used a second account to cut a log and light a fire, which allowed the speedrun account to cook the shrimp on that fire, allowing him to pass through the gate without ever having to talk to the instructor again about cutting and lighting logs. The second trick that saves a fair amount of time is done at the melee and range section of Tutorial Island. By using another alt account that has a bow and arrows, he would be able to damage the giant rats in advance, so that he'd have to do less attacks on the speedrun account. For the first giant rat, he'd deal 1 damage on the alt and 2 damage on the speedrunner, as there's a timer on the red gate that doesn't allow you to leave straight away after 1 attack, so 1 damage from the alt suffices on the first rat. And then he'd proceed to do 2 damage with the alt on the second rat, followed by logging out on that alt account. This allowed him to deal 1 damage with range on the speedrunner, which registers the kill as his and allows him to progress with just 1 range attack launched, obviously saving a lot of time as well. So to do these 2 tricks myself, I also set up 2 alt accounts for my speedruns, one at the start to light the fire and one at the rats to help me with the combat part. To say all of this went without issues would be a lie, but I'll talk more about this later during the actual attempts. Now, just having all of this set up would of course not be all that's needed for a successful run. A big part of this run is knowing when to input the next action on every single part, so learning the final parts of each NPC dialogue was also a very important part to this, because that allows you to input the next action right as you finish the dialogue, usually saving at least 1 tick, which does add up in the long run. Something else that also affects the time spent is Npc Placement. Now, this isn't something I try to manipulate, as it would take way too many alt accounts to do so properly, but considering a lot of the NPCs you have to interact with on Tutorial Island tend to move around a lot, placing them in an optimal spot by keeping them in dialogue with another account would speed up the run by at least a few seconds, but by not doing so, it's another extra chunk of RNG added to the run. One last thing I should also mention is that at the very start of Tutorial Island, the guide asks you if you've played the game before and gives you 3 options to choose from. Now for this run we have to select that we are brand new, as otherwise the magic tutor at the very end will have extra dialogue about Iron Man mode, which we do want to avoid. Unfortunately, the placement of this option at the start is random, which means I can't press 1 on my keyboard to select the brand new option, as it'll always be in a different spot. So I guess for the optimal run you'll always press 1 and restart if it wasn't correct, but I chose to simply try and select the correct option as fast as possible, which sometimes cost me 1 or 2 ticks. Now, after watching Research's vid through and through and setting up my alt accounts, it was time to start some actual attempts, and here's how it went. On my very first attempt, it quickly became clear that I still had a lot to learn. I was clicking all over the place, not knowing when to input the next action, how long every dialogue lasted, and just in general not really having all of the mechanics down yet. I used my fishing net on the spot instead of simply left-clicking the spot. I used my bread dough on the range instead of simply left-clicking that as well. A lot of small things like that. I'd say the biggest time lost on my first attempt was me not being fully prepared for the combat section that requires the alt to shoot the reds, as I completely fumbled that part, and also not being prepared to change my settings, which is another important part I did not prepare for. It's important to continuously drop all items you don't need anymore as to preserve run energy throughout the run, so for that I eventually started enabling shift click to drop at the start when running to the first instructor. I then also wanted to use the escape key to close the current interface, and enabling this option was done when going down the mines while running to the mining instructor, as for some reason this allowed me to do so without stopping my character from running, which did happen if I tried to do it on my way to the quest instructor. After a lot of mistakes and time lost, I ended my first full run at just under 4 minutes and 8 seconds. All of these mistakes were to be expected, however, and I'd eventually start remembering the sequences I'd have to go through and start getting better at all of the different sections of the tutorial island. On the second attempt, it immediately became clear that I'd end up restarting a lot, as there's a chance to burn the shrimp, resulting in a failed run, so at that point there's no reason to continue. It was then on my third attempt that I already ended up breaking into the top 10 tutorial island records at the time. I still made some mistakes, of course, like trying to click the bread dough where I misclick and lose some time, and I also mistimed my split on the door, even though that doesn't really matter in the overall run. I didn't enable closing interfaces with escape yet on this one either, so that one cost me a lot of time as well, and I messed up a bit more with the reds, although I got some really good RNG on my hits, which salvaged all of the other mistakes. I ended this run at 3 minutes and 37 seconds, just about 11 seconds shy of Soup's record, so I felt like I already improved a lot and was really excited to try and get even better times. A few more sub 4 minute attempts later and I made another mistake that I didn't think of before. As I was doing the melee kill on the runner, I was preparing the second red on the alt account when I accidentally ended up killing it with the alt, resulting in that account progressing the tutorial and no longer being able to attack reds with range. That meant that I could no longer use that account as my alt account and I had to create a new one to use as my new alt ranger. This ended up happening a few more times, which was quite annoying to say the least. Eventually I kept improving, ever so slightly getting better and better PB times, but usually the giant red section was the make or break moment because it was so heavily dependent on RNG, as you can tell by the way I named my clips back when I recorded them as well. But then, on this run, all the stars aligned, everything went really well, and I got good red RNG, which resulted in me setting a new PB that ended up being my last one as well. I'll just let it play out. And there you have it, 3 minutes and 14 seconds, my overall personal best. Of course I still made quite some mistakes costing me valuable time, but it did get me to claim the second place on the leaderboards on speedrun.com. The crazy thing, however, is that even with this being by far the best time I've gotten, it's still a massive 20 seconds behind on Research's world record, and I can't possibly imagine ever getting close to that, which just goes to show how insanely good his run was, so massive props to him for being able to do that. I also noticed that about 1 month ago someone called Infralow managed to get a 3 minute 17 second run without multi-login, which has to be a really good one as well considering the amount of extra time he had to spend chopping logs, making a fire and not having an alt account at the rat cage. Overall, this was a really fun experience for me and I'm really happy with the result I managed to get on my run. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this sort of content and if you want to see more of it, cause I am more than down to try and do other OSRS speedruns or even other games if that's what you guys would be interested in, just as some bonus content on the channel. That'll be it for me today, thank you all for watching, once again special thanks to Adam for his support on Patreon, and I'll talk to you all soon, take care.